You have a load of guitars.
No, those are just the ones that I use daily.
Weird sentence to start with no.
That wasn't a disagreement.
Welcome to Dialog Choices podcast. It's been a bit. We're here for a specific topic because Bird wanted to talk about it, and now I'm going to stare at him.
Sure. So we're going to be talking about the Stop Killing Games initiative, which is super relevant right now and won't be relevant in 3 weeks. But I wanted to kind of get this off my chest because I think I have, as a video game developer, I have a perspective that will hopefully be interesting and clear up a lot of confusion about this particular initiative. So real briefly, what is Stop Killing Games? Well, Webster's dictionary defines an initiative as Stop Killing Games is a initiative that's sort of like a petition. If you're from the United States, we don't really have the concept of a initiative in the way that like the European Union does. And so that's what this is. It's a petition-like thing where you use it to start a conversation with the government about a specific topic in an official capacity. And so it's a little bit stronger than an initiative, than like a petition, basically. It's not like, change.org where you get a bunch of people to sign it and then Obama says, hey, thanks, that was cool, guys. This is about
there's actually a system for introducing it as a thing that has to be engaged with, as opposed to just being like, cool.
Yeah. But it's not legislature, right? Like it's not here's the law that I want you to implement. It's literally just here's a topic that I want you to officially discuss and like engage with. So that's misconception number one about this thing. There's going to be a bit of a trend here where we're like talking about like a ton of misconceptions. So I buried the lead. Sorry about that. Stop Killing Games. What is it about?
Also, introductions. Everyone here is a YouTuber. That's Birdcatcher. That's Colonel RPG. That's Toaster Williams. And also Birdcatcher's a game developer is the relevant information here as far as who actually has final say on whether anything's true in this group.
Yep. So, what was I going to say? So the initiative is basically about preservation of your ability to play games indefinitely. So, for example, a live service game may get put into like an end of service or end of life thing. And if you have paid any amount of money, like buying like your favorite waifu, that if the publishers or the developers decide that they can't afford to keep supporting the game, your money just vanishes. So like as a comparison, imagine if you had like a car and eventually Toyota just said, hey, we don't support Toyota Camrys anymore, and you were forced to give your car back to Toyota. Like that's kind of the absurdity that we're trying to deal with this initiative. So basically all it says is that developers and publishers of games in the future, this isn't retroactive, need to be upfront with what they're going to do when the game goes end of life.
Like it's basically around the idea that like if you liked Quake back in the day, you can still like Quake now. You just play Quake with your friends because it's just software that people can maybe do some work to like update to make it emulatable on modern stuff as time goes on. But like you could still play games you owned and like before 2005, essentially,
Mhm.
almost universally, besides like some dead MMOs that takes more work. But like, if you were day one on Concord, and then 3 days later it didn't exist anymore, you never experienced Concord again for the rest of your life, even if you loved that game, because and even if you paid for it. And in that case, they refunded it and stuff like that. But like, games just disappear, and like there is this like weird creeping dread of like, I can still play. My most played multiplayer game ever is Halo 2, probably, and I can still play it to this day. But one of my favorite games in modern era is like the Overwatch games, and like the moment that stops being a service that works immediately, but this is a bit of less of a thing for Blizzard most of the time, but like that just go away one day. Like there is no like, oh, I put in my Overwatch disc and I can play like manually set up matches with my friends and stuff like that. Like it'll just go away one day, inevitably, forever. And then that's
you mentioned Blizzard,
and Blizzard is a weird example because of how long lived Blizzard games are and how few they make. But this has had a like EA and Ubisoft with their annual releases and how all of those games having multiplayer, for example, like a lot of things just come and go in almost no time. And when it comes to games that you literally need online services to run at all, or games that are online only, multiplayer only, and so on, the moment that the official support goes away, the game ceases to functionally exist because you just can't hop on and play it with your friends without those services.
A good example
is
from
mostly going to be framed around multiplayer games, but I do want to really quickly inject that this does cover single player games. The extent of that is going to be games that have DRM in particular, where that's kind of but that's really all we need to really like talk about with regards to single player games. The focus is going to be on multiplayer, but for single player, it's just literally at some point, if my studio shuts down, I want to just quickly say like, we've disabled the DRM, something like that, right? That's kind of the extent of the single player discussion.
The notable examples, even just from this week, where like Anthem just got shut down finally, like their servers got taken down. No one can log into Anthem anymore. That game would ostensibly, if I understand correctly, the initiative isn't saying that EA needs to, or BioWare needs to put up a new server for it so that people can play. It's just, it needs to be accessible so that either people can play it offline or fans can take it into their own hands. And
although I think this initiative is only talking about, it's only trying to mandate future games as opposed to retroactively fixing all the past examples. But of course, naturally, past examples are the only ones we have to talk about.
And I believe the game that kicked off all of this was a racing game.
The Crew, I believe.
The Crew. The Crew, which was a multiplayer racing game, but had a pretty significant, like, you can just play that game alone. Yet it was taken offline, and everyone just couldn't play their game anymore. And that was what kind of inspired the movement. This idea of getting something in front of the EU Commission so that maybe we could begin, if not stopping that from happening, making it so that there were actual guidelines in place so that when games did reach end of life or companies couldn't support servers anymore, players did have some degree of recourse for at least having access to what they purchased.
I also just have a personal gripe because I'm like, video games are just becoming more ephemeral and fractured over time, to the point where like even like one of the first little video essays I tried to do was just discussing like, hey, they remade all the Zelda games as HD remakes, but all of them are immediately aged because they all have these fucked up online features that weren't in the original game, and most of those were already turned off. You're like, this is really frustrating that like games are actively becoming a thing you only experience the year they're out, and then history just kind of disappears and chunks of games go away or entire games go away.
You mentioned Blizzard before, and they have a perfect example with that. If you have the CD of Diablo 2, you can play Diablo 2 launch on any computer, or maybe you need Windows 98 or whatever. But Diablo 2 Resurrected is always online. You need to be connected to servers if you don't have, even if you play single player. Even if you don't.
Oh,
have
Diablo
internet,
2 Resurrected. Okay.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
whatever reason, my
that's
mind went
basically
to
a
Diablo 2 Hellfire, and I was like, the expansion pack
no,
that was
the
online.
no.
We were talking about
talking-
the yeah. Okay.
Basically, the remake or the remaster that they made for Diablo 2.
Or SimCity 2013, the live service SimCity that couldn't run on its own servers, so they had to disable the fast forward mode for the entire community for months. Entire features couldn't work because they mandated the live service, and then it couldn't actually run on that. But we're getting off topic a bit.
Yeah. Well, no, these are good examples, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna, because sort of my take on the issue of games like Diablo 3 when it came out, and it still is an online only game. A lot of people play it only single player, and SimCity was like that. And there's there's not a lot of single player games that are online that require online, but there are some, including Ubisoft games. And I think there's an incentive to make those games, even though they're primarily single player, make them have online features that justify them being online. And that's the case for SimCity, whatever, the most recent one that had your city connected to other cities, and you couldn't opt out of that. It was just how the game was made, and that's how they justified the always online. But at the end of the day, that's just DRM. It's what Bird was saying. For single player games, they just really need to disable the DRM. The problem is, it's not just about, and I think the problem with the crew in particular was that it wasn't just about, or it wasn't presented just about the DRM, but the features, like, because you would be able to race against anybody that was online, and there's some games like that, and the crew was like that. If you just walked around in your single player, you'd see other. I think you'd have access at least to. It's like being invaded in Dark Souls or something like that. And what I'm saying, my point is, I think this issue is always going to be connected to DRM, whether it's for single player or for multiplayer. It's a matter of
the entire conversation is basically just like de jure or de facto DRM, one way or the other. It's like
it's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, like it's always functionally DRM in that it's online only.
It's an interesting way to put it. But one thing I will say, and this is where my perspective, I think, as a developer, started to really get agitated by the discussions around this initiative, is that what we have basically laid out here is kind of the extent of the text of the initiative. Where things have gone with this is they start to think about like how you solve this and what the technical problems are. And a lot of the strongest voices have thought about the tech, and then their minds they just run with it. And they imagine it as like the most difficult thing basically on the face of the earth, when it's literally like, it just says, leave it in a playable state. It's basically it. It's not leave it exactly for me. It's not, it could even be like, hey, you can keep playing this game, but due to our commerce platform, you don't have access to our skins anymore. The skins that you bought, that still falls within compliance of the text as it's laid out. Like,
I've seen some extreme takes where people think that the lack of the inability to kill the game means that they have to like maintain the live service indefinitely and keep providing new skins at gunpoint for their game forever in some crazy infeasible way. When in reality, it seems to be more like, oh, if Overwatch dies, you should be able to like use LogMe and Hamachi or some bullshit to like give your IP address to your friend and be able to play a version of the game that has like the characters and maps at all.
I mean, even just going by the raw text, like if Overwatch dies, you should be able to spin up bot matches with yourself. Like that's literally enough to.
Yeah, it's playable. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
If you fire up the training mode, I mean, people would probably argue that's not going far enough, but by the literal interpretation of the text, that is a playable state of the game. And so,
also, if bot matches worked, somebody would figure out how to turn multiplayer on us at that point anyway.
That's a big part of it. The thing is that people really say like, oh, you need to release like the server binaries and you need to release like the source code of the game and stuff like that. And it's like, you don't need to release the source code. The gist of all of this is that if it's difficult for players to get the game to a playable state, that's on them. It just needs to be possible. So if it's literally like getting a playable state for your game is you have to download Amazon Linux, then throw it on your own AWS cloud, and you have to reverse engineer the server by like listening to it with Wireshark and like do all of that, that's still fine. Like it's literally just, can you keep playing it at all? Because very dedicated players, generally speaking, are probably going to spend the time to figure it out, if nothing more than just the love of hacking shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, and historically speaking, gamers have already done this. In fact, we're very good at doing exactly that thing.
But also gamers get sued because they tried to do that because they don't have the
rights. Yeah, so it needs to be legally defended. So it just gets shut down every time it happens.
Which again loops back into a matter of copyright. They need to be either forced or allowed to release a partial release anyway, copyright of that sort of data, because server infrastructure, and Bert, you know better than I do, runs on stuff that they pay other people and they have license agreements, non-disclosed stuff, and that runs on other people's intellectual property, and they can't just release it. And that happens with single player games, let alone multiplayer games.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it, is that people have been able to figure this out and have done it many, many, many times. Like WoW is the one I keep saying, but basically any MMO with private servers, it is pretty much possible to do it. I'm sure that if I had looked for like Ragnarok Online or like MapleStory and like tons of stuff like that, I'm sure people have done it.
I mean, those private servers have existed going back to when the games were still, big and active. I think MMOs are weirdly, they are the genre that we think of as being always online, and how do they exist if the end of service comes? But actually, MMOs are historically the games that fans have preserved the most effectively.
They're also, I think, the ones that are most exempt from the ruling from the idea, because they're subscription based, and this specifically doesn't talk about subscription based games.
Right. And what you said is super pertinent, I think, Toaster, about the fact that MMOs are one of the easier examples to do this with. I will also say that people way overstate how difficult this would be to do with live service games, because
speaking as somebody who works on live service games, right?
Like your matchmaking service for your game doesn't run on like a fucking quantum computer that nobody else could ever do, using algorithms that have never been seen before. It's like the vast majority of these services are you have the start matchmaking API that you call, that just is like, it runs like the smart match algorithm that somebody released a thesis on 15 years ago, and like they already have like the math out there. And literally the ask for the services is, give us a schema of what you're like, just give us the list of the APIs that you call, and like what you expect the response, like what the game expects the requests and responses to be, so that we don't need to know how it's implemented. We don't need to know how you did it. We just need to know what the game expects, so that we can create our own database on our own AWS account. And if anything, I would say that live service games are easier, because that's literally the point of why games move to this model, is because you can, without live services, all of the state that forms the back end of the game, a lot of it was held on the servers and in that source code. So it was like the state of a player in like this old model was very much like if that server went down, you could lose that data pretty easily. And every kind of server instance was its own little like container. And so that's why, you know, if you think about WoW, like whole worlds were on like specific blades of a server rack, and that was just literally like a hardware limitation.
I've seen
until
one.
like the microservice model started to get popular, and then it was like, then it became way easier to share data between your servers because it wasn't literally held on those servers. So the whole point of live services was to make things easier, and that does extend to this initiative. It will be easier to do live services. I don't think people get that, and I think that it's very much in the interest of publishers and developers to emphasize like, oh, it's really, really hard to do this. Like, you'll never be able to break away from the live service. And the sleight of hand with that argument is that it's difficult because they own the infrastructure and they don't want to let you do it. But that's the crux of it. The difficulty comes from them owning it, not the implementation as a player. I would say that it's like one of the easiest parts is going to be doing the live services. They're all the same. You can go on to the Epic documentation, and it will say for the Unreal Engine, like here's like the inventory module that every game, well, the vast majority of games use. And the inventory module will just say like get player inventory, update item, you know, delete item, and shit like that. And you know, it's out there. So basically it's just, hey, do you use this? Okay, I can go make my own version now. None of this stuff is secret, and it's really, really annoying that people think it is. That's all the same. They're all the same.
I think most summarizing sentence just to read out is that it says the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement of the side of the publisher.
I think the games that are going to be most directly impacted by this, as far as their current existence is actually gacha games, where they are not subscription based, but in most cases, gacha games, you know, they connect to a server, they load assets in. When they hit end of service, it's like, sorry, you can't play the game anymore. You launch the app and then it disappears. You know, it doesn't allow you to connect or even launch. So that's really when I think of like live service or I guess distributor driven games, is like those are going to be the things that, you know, you need to be able to download an offline version for, because as of right now, I mean, as you said, they own the infrastructure. Gacha games literally store nothing on your device, really. You just log into a server and it pulls everything from the server.
So, I mean, the way that you would be able to solve that from a technical perspective, the most limited way I can think of would be to release the like asset files that you store on the server and just say, here's a zip file with all the 3D models that we were keeping from you.
Yep.
Go nuts. Because you can then make somebody can make the asset like distributor API, and just one person volunteers to like, I'm gonna put all of like our waifu models and you can download them from here, and everyone is basically good to go again.
Do you think that would be like, for example, if Europe passes a law that ends up, or I say Europe passes a law oversimplifying the whole process so much.
I get it.
But if the European countries agree to pass laws that force gacha games to have that sort of end of life plan, do you think it would mean that fewer gacha games get into the European? I say Europe because as it stands right now, it's possibly the where we would see the sooner.
Yeah, I mean,
reactions.
To respond to the point you just made, the idea is that if we target the European Union for like making laws, those tend to have like a application across the entire world. To the first point of would that impact the creation of more gacha games? Absolutely not. These gacha games, like you're asking, like, is a publisher going to stop making games in a genre that prints $20 million a month?
No,
Probably not.
That's not what I mean. I'm saying if they would shy away from the European market, because gacha games.
Oh, they shy away from the market.
Yeah.
I think that inevitably I think some, yes. Like, the answer to that question is going to be there's a little bit in column A, a little bit in column B, right? Like, some games will capitulate and change. Some developers will say no. And I think in this case, and this is the reason why I brought up gacha games in general, is that there's like a lot of copyright. It does link back to what you were talking about, Colonel, with copyright with it, where it's like some gacha games are driven by like extremely arcane talent agencies and copyright law around like artists and who's making what. And as a result, they don't want you to store the files on your hard drive because that like devalues their brand. This is something that we saw with this isn't a gacha game, but this is something we saw with Judgment. Getting those games, the Yakuza spinoffs, getting those games on PC was really hard because a talent agency that owned the likeness of some of the actors in that game was like, we don't want them on PC because people will use their characters as mods, and you'll be able to mod them into other games, and that devalues their brand. You know, there will be circumstances where gacha games that might have existed previously will not exist. I think any change to how things work will result in some degree of that. The thing is that curbs like a very predatory nature of the industry in general. And I don't think that is necessarily a bad sacrifice.
There's an element of me that's like, oh, good. Because I'm like, I look at gacha games and I'm like, this is the specific genre that is literally begging to be legislated from every possible angle, and everything about what it's doing feels like a ticking time bomb where something is going to happen. And like, it's like this element of like, oh, if we legislate like predatory monetization strategies that make games disappear, what happens when you have to legislate the game that is more monetization strategy than game? And it's like, oh no, I guess there's it's just like there's nothing of value left. I guess that's them at some point.
Here's a technical solution that does get around all of the copyright, though. They release the file format of the assets, and they say you have to make your own public domain versions of these characters now.
Make the game itself playable, but it has a bunch of placeholder assets instead.
You got to replace them with a Hatsune George Washington.
Yeah,
that's a very good point. Yeah.
And then they, if it's like, okay, I can't make March 7th or whatever her name is from Honkai Star Rail. It's like, okay, we now have December 13th. And that's our character. And she writes poetry instead of uses a camera or whatever. And this is the extent of what I know about that game.
They named a character a date? Okay.
I guess so. I know that there's a character called March 7th and a character called Stell. And I don't know what they do. And I don't know what they look like.
It varies a bit. There are games, as certain legislative things happen, it's always like this. It's like a profit calculation, basically. There are games that will avoid certain markets for certain reasons. There are games that will create a separate version for certain markets, like the goreless version of Left 4 Dead back in the day for Australia, I think. And then there's cases
Australia
like
and Germany, I thought.
Yeah, and then I think it's Australia was the one that sued Valve over refunds, and that became just a universal feature when that came through. Right. It's like it's a case by case basis how the reaction happens, but in many cases, when these kind of choices, when these kind of things happen, they often have wider sweeping effects, which is why I think they're targeting the EU when I don't think the guy who runs the thing is from the EU, which sounds a little like,
I think he lives in Poland.
Does he live in Poland?
I think he used to live in America.
I literally found out about him like yesterday because I was just doing research for the thing you guys want to talk about. So I'm like, he sounds not European by voice. Is all I'm going on.
Now, that being said, I have no idea how China is or would respond to something like this, because they really kind of are always doing their own thing, right? Like, because oftentimes the version of the game that you get in China is not the version that was made in the US. It's often way easier to just be like, there's a Chinese company and we're going to sell our IP to them for that market, and they have to make the game again from scratch. And we hope that it's even the same like genre. Like, that's the extent of how little we penetrate into that market from the outside. So I'm not going to even begin to speculate on what that
is, because there's so many rules about what's accepted there and the process of allowing things there that they essentially have to like make it from the ground up to be like essentially like kosher.
No, I think it's more to do with like the copyright kerfuffle, debacle, whatever you want to call it, and the Great Firewall and stuff like that. Just make it so that it's way easier to not try to sell the game, but to just sell the license to the game over there. I don't even know if anybody tries to sell like their binaries or anything like that to China anymore. I assume that everyone just does the IP approach because it's so difficult not to. Well, which is
interesting because that's certainly not how the movies work, at least. Like, they don't say refilm the movie for the Chinese market.
Yeah, but that's because software in particular is like such a thorny thing in terms of like trade, right?
I want to go back to, you mentioned the court case in Australia that changed the way Steam does refunds, or forced Steam to allow for refunds, as far as I remember. Something that I hear people bring up in the context of, you know, the games being ephemeral these days is the notion or the way that Steam in particular, but not just Steam, is a platform for renting games rather than a platform for buying games. And I kind of want to bounce that off of you guys, because from a legal perspective that may be the case, but from a practical perspective, Steam isn't any different from, for example, GOG, where in GOG, if you buy a game, they give you a file. It doesn't have DRMs. All the games available on that site don't have DRM. So they give you a file. It's a GOG style file. But you don't need to log in. You just installs the game. It has all the files for the game. And it just installs the game. You can put that file on a drive. You can upload it to the cloud. You can share it with other people. You bought the game, and it's basically like as close as it gets to having a physical disc without DRM. And Steam,
I'm wondering if I've heard this many times, and I've always taken it at face value. But asking me to kind of examine that right now, I would have to look into some details of things like, when you buy a game from Steam, do you get a license for Steam? Or would it be possible, like, hey, we're pulling things off of Steam. If you send us an email, we'll give you a one-to-one like copy that has a different license now. Steam probably wouldn't like that because it would be transferable, but are you transferring it when you just say like, hey, you've lost the license you had with Steam, but we as the developer, we're going to give you the Birdcatcher license and you can like
I know
seamlessly do it.
Some developers and mostly indie developers, but if you buy a game on Steam and there's an itch.io version, you can say, hey, can I get access to the itch.io version? And they will just give it to you. I think as far as the Steam like EULA and TOS goes, like as far as all of their agreements go, like you are it's pretty boilerplate. You are buying access to the game through Steam. That being
but that's
said,
not what you get though. Like in practice, you just get the files for the game, and yes, you can launch the files through Steam. You can do that with any game. It doesn't have to be through Steam.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but
what I was going to say,
just go to the. Oh yeah, go ahead, sir.
What I was going to say is that some developers. So there's actually a big misconception about Steam. Steam does not require you to use DRM. You do not need to use Steam's DRM to run games from Steam. A lot of games do, but a lot of games don't. So there are games on Steam that you download and you just literally get the same file folders that you would get if you installed through GOG.
And you can just navigate to the folder and click on the executable while Steam is off.
Yeah, there are some games that require Steam DRM. Of course, those are all, we can get into those topics later. But my point is, like, no matter what Steam's EULA says or what how it's actually distributing things to you says, some developers still just give you access to just like base installers, right? And I think what Kernel's getting at here is that the pragmatic reality is more nuanced than the like on paper reality, where Steam says we're giving you access to a rental, but some devs just have already set the precedent that actually you don't just get access to a rental, you just have the files.
It's super messy. Also, like, it's a conversation I've been having for over a decade, and people have always been like, oh, Lord Gabbin will just flip a switch if Valve ever goes down, and all of our games will just be ours forever. And I'm like, you're never citing anything when you say that. That's a weird amount of faith to have in any video game company.
From an infrastructural standpoint,
it's a weird amount of faith to have in general in this industry, but it's also like, he doesn't have the rights to other people's games. Maybe Valve is like, oh, here's Portal forever, fuck it if they go under, but they can't say that about EA's games. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think
EA can say that about Steam or like about Valve, and that's really like, it gets so weird. People extend way too much good faith to Valve.
Yes,
and it's very lucky that they've not exercised what they could do.
Yeah, I mean, and that gets to an even more kind of complicated and nuanced, difference between what is actually written versus like what we've all experienced, which is like the argument of our digital games owned, always comes back to like, well, they can delete your games, or like one day you could log on and just not have access to it. And while this is certainly true from like a publisher perspective, like with games like The Crew, I can say for a fact, as someone who has been buying games purely digitally since you started to be able to do that on Steam and on the Xbox 360, I have never once actually had a game disappear from my library and become inaccessible, with the exception of PT, which I think is literally the only example of a game that I've ever owned where my license has been revoked digitally.
But you could still play though, right? Wasn't PT available even after, like, if you had it installed?
I think at some point, didn't you have to like preserve your PS4 and like offline and to keep
offline,
it? Wasn't it trying?
Yeah.
Weren't they trying to delete it off your console?
It just made it so that if it ever got off the console, you could never get it back again. But
I was so annoyed I didn't have a copy at that time. I'm like, God damn it.
I mean, but that's beside the point. I guess the point I'm making is like, experientially, this argument has a lot of boogeymen. Like we're talking in a lot of theoreticals, not just us, but like people, right? Like this argument is one in a way primarily on principle, because the industry is so liquid right now and so nebulous. We've never actually fully experienced what it would be like if a purely apocalyptic scenario happened and Steam turned off and no one had access to their games.
Yeah, a contract is only as good as it ends up being enforced in the end, right?
Yeah.
And we've never seen this tested, so it could
although
be
a few
that
versions of that though, with like
work.
Xbox 360 and Wii U, like we do have entire marketplaces being turned off one by one. And in many cases, a lot of games that only exist there that just cease to functionally don't exist anymore. Although it's a bit of a different conversation about archiving things, because it's not technically, a lot of those games aren't disabled; they're just literally unviable anymore.
Yeah, it's the way to access.
It's a different angle
off.
of the archival conversation. Is the fact that entire marketplaces of games have disappeared, and more quietly in the phone space, entire like somewhat unofficial eras of phone games keep vanishing every year and so on. As somebody who doesn't play phone games and only tangentially remembers, like, oh yeah, people would recommend like Infinity Blade and Monument Valley are the ones you'd hear about all the time, and then you go back and look like
Space Mobile.
Yeah, you'd go back and look like, oh
Jump.
yeah, it was like that one game by Epic, I think was Infinity Blade. You look into like, oh, that game hasn't been playable for ages. It just doesn't exist basically. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about there being console
on
generations
on
phones happening every 6 months.
This is not really relevant, but it is funny. And I don't know if I'm going to get a whole lot of opportunities to talk about this specific thing. There are a lot of games that have fallen off of Steam. They're typically a lot older. And what it is games that download content from servers owned by the publishers who also let their websites expire. So when that happens, anybody can buy that website and put whatever they want on it to respond.
Oh my God.
All that is to say is there are a lot of old games that had to be removed because they started displaying porn ads.
No.
Yep.
It's maybe that's the only thing that applies indefinitely with the in terms of support from this initiative is that you have to keep owning the domain. You just make it like a configuration, of course, but
you could just swap it to a generic thing.
Yeah, it is very funny to imagine like Overwatch streaming in content that's just from like it's just porn. It's
right,
like,
all
you
those
used to have to go
hooks on the
slightly
start
out of your way
screen
for
that's
it.
programmed to display things for advertising
Also
and seasonal information.
Yeah.
Also known as you played Overwatch.
Yeah,
because it's already porn.
Oh my God. Reinhardt though. He's like an 8-foot tall man who's also a bull sometimes. Anyway.
Yes.
So I learned about this entire topic because somebody represented it very poorly, and I don't want to talk about that person because they're turning into a lolcow, and the internet's really weird about people who are wrong on the internet to the point where it gets abusive and strange. But it did lead to a level of drama surrounding this where apparently every large YouTuber responded by covering it immediately. So I've seen it on Jacksepticeye and Moist Critical and Philip DeFranco and a bunch of other channels just everywhere. And I would not know what Destiny ever talks about. But it spread very quickly to the point where this one person arguing so poorly seems to have become maybe even why the initiative is passing right now as far as like the signature count it needs, because it currently has over 1 million over 1.2 million signatures out of a million, and it's trying to obviously get more and more.
For those listening,
it's in the EU. In the UK, it's not signed up enough yet, I don't think.
No, the UK is also above the threshold. But if you haven't signed up and you're interested in signing up, just because it has passed the threshold doesn't mean your participation is not needed, because they do a culling and they just sort of like anybody that is forging their signature, duplicates, things like that.
Oh yeah, a bunch of the number could be fake, which given the amount of United States attention it's getting, there might be a lot of fake signatures by the standards of what it is.
Which is a crime, by the way.
That's a crime. Don't forge your signature.
Yeah, if you that's a big difference.
Sign it if you're in the EU, and if you're not, tell people. But don't sign it yourself.
If you sign a petition in the US, like, and you do it fraudulently, like, whatever. But if you sign a European Union initiative, that's a crime that is actually enforced. So don't bot this thing. You will probably get reported to Interpol. Where it goes from there, who the fuck knows? But it is a crime.
It'd also just be tragic to think that it passed, and have the numbers be there and have people stop signing it because they think it made it already, and it turns out that it was just all bots because somebody, you know, who was in favor of it decided to just cheat the system and screw everyone over.
The EU IT Commission or organization or whatever, basically the people that own the website, have gotten in touch with this initiative to have a discussion about like whether there's botting, what the protections are, and stuff like that. They haven't talked about any details because why would you right now? But they are like the IT side of this thing like is already aware and have said like we'll help you make sure that this doesn't blow up basically. But yeah, I was thinking about the drama angle of all this yesterday as a topic that'd be interesting. It's kind of remarkable. So the guy behind this thing, his name is Ross. He runs a YouTube channel called Accursed Farms. It's been around for a very long time. I've been watching it on and off. He does very niche kind of weird games from like Windows like 3.1 or Windows 95, which is like its whole pocket of gaming history that if you grew up in it, it's like very special to you. And if you didn't, you're not even aware of like what that was like. So he also did a series where he role played Gordon Freeman playing through Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 as a complete farce of the character, where Gordon Freeman is a silent protagonist, so it was called Inside Freeman's Mind, where you just heard his inner monologue instead, and it was just him running around being like fucking zombies and like hitting things with a crowbar. And if you're interested in that, it is a very funny series. But the point is,
those are his most popular videos by far. It's millions.
They're definitely kind of early internet meme royalty.
Yeah, he said he doesn't really have content brain or something to that effect, and so he's never, I don't think he even has like 1 million subs. Maybe he fucking does now. I don't know. But he said, he's always tried to shy away from a lot of like bigger YouTube and internet trends. So he's never been like into drama and things like that. So what's super interesting about that is he basically set himself up the perfect drama bomb to have this thing succeed. There's like a person that people really don't like who got it wrong and is very vocally wrong as like kind of the villain of the drama. There's the initiative was started a year ago, and there's like a year timeline that you have to like get the number of signatures or else the initiative fails to pass, and that expires at the end of this month. So he set up like a ticking clock. He like comes across as like very genuine and authentic, and he really cares about this thing, and he's like seen as like this underdog too because he's fairly obscure. And so like it was this perfect moment to like, if it was intentional to try and like psyop this thing into fucking like succeeding, it would have been marvelous. But he just puts out a video where he's like, hey, this initiative isn't going to make it. We only have 500,000 signatures and we have a month to go. So fuck it. I didn't want to reply to drama, but here we go. And so he did eventually reply to this person who has been kind of like I said, the villain of the whole situation. And then it just perfectly set up to get picked up by people that actually do cover internet drama. And there has been a long tail of like, okay, this got picked up by like Critical, for example, and then Jacksepticeye and stuff like that. And then there's this long tail of channels that are like lolcow documenters who have like used that to bootstrap their career.
I mean, I know we like to
so
dismiss
ironic.
Reddit and stuff like that. I know we like to dismiss Reddit and stuff like that, but it's been huge on Reddit. It's hit R all, it hit R popular. Like, I mean, it's basically anywhere you go on the internet right now. This is sort of the main topic of video game news currently. In that, and that's kind of significant. It really did catapult it to the top of the top of mind, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we're only doing this podcast because I found out about it through that. And the only reason that I actually care about this topic is because it kind of triggered my server engineering, service engineering mind to be like, ooh, how would I solve this? This is kind of a fun thing. People are getting this wrong, and being wrong about something near a programmer is like the worst thing you can do for your free time and mine. So that's why I brought this up. But I mean, I think it's patently obvious that this initiative was not going to succeed until it became lolcow bait. You know, it went from like 500,000 signatures over 11 months to like passing within a week. I brought this topic up when it had like 600,000 signatures last week, and it's doubled.
It was a matter of days.
By the time we talked about this,
it was definitely a matter of days. I got out of nowhere, I got recommended Jacksepticeye's video on his second channel because it wasn't
same.
And it's just out of nowhere. I'm like,
the video is so fucking funny. I saw it.
Why am I getting Jacksepticeye?
He talks about how he's going to be brief. Already 4 minutes into his intro, and I'm like, dude.
I think
we've
already. I mean, it's kind of interesting because we did talk about this when it first hit, like in our streamer Discord of like, hey, the Stop Killing Games is happening. This is kind of neat. But like it never evolved into a deeper conversation, 7 months ago or whatever when we first hit it. Because like if you are plugged in, this has been something that has been talked about for almost a year now. Like it is something that has been out there. It just wasn't getting the attention it needed. But I think it goes to show just like, it doesn't matter how well intentioned your project is or how good it is. People just can't be motivated to do anything unless it's out of spite. And that really did move it. Move the needle this time.
Oh yeah, it did. This is like a pure sociological experiment. Like if you wanted to write a white paper about this for your sociology degree, it couldn't be more like clean and like a perfect thing to write about. Well,
it's like H Bomber Guy's recent career. It's like no one cares about plagiarism. They just care about a plagiarist. You need every narrative needs a villain to motivate people. I'm like, I don't know if I love that trajectory for history.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it goes without saying. I think you also said, might have lost my train of thought. We're not going to talk about the guy. Okay, no. None of us have any interest in talking about that angle here. But I just the impact and like the story that evolved is fascinating, concerning. It piques curiosity, piques discussion. I
mean, if you even engage with this topic, your entire sidebar becomes 500 drama videos about the person that isn't even the point of the initiative. I'm like, this isn't healthy for any of us. This isn't a good thing.
It's not healthy, but it's succeeded.
Yep. But no, but the best value this video has, which we should probably most pivot to, is just like any insight you can give us about the feasibility of this stuff or implementation, or how reasonable it is to have an end of life plan for a game, especially knowing that you have to do it before you start making the game. Like, how does it seem feasible to all the projects that you've worked on so far that could have been implemented into them, since you're an actual game developer?
It is a case-by-case basis, and the fallback on all of this is you can just say to the player, good luck, have fun, and do the most bare bones, minimal thing to keep it playable. As long this initiative, in some sense, I could describe it as, we won't sue you if you try to keep playing. It could be like that minimal of a commitment from your developers, but you don't have to, by the text, really do anything other than just say, we're not going to make it worse than it needs to be for you to try and do this.
No,
So it could literally
cyanide
be like
capsule in the code to wipe it from existence the moment you're not profiting from it anymore.
It could be difficult. It could be, in practice, impossible, but it can't actually be impossible.
It's like trying to stop game developers from like Roadrunner and Coyoteing their game. Was that the one?
Yeah.
that just got sat on because it was more profitable to not let people have it.
And I think developers will also want to do this, because nobody wants to make something knowing that it could go away someday.
Yeah,
developers,
no one wants their art
want
to go away. It's purely their corporate structure that's making these choices ahead of them. We're like, no, I want the things I make to be here forever because I made them, and don't want my resume to be a graveyard of vaporware, retroactive vaporware.
A lot of the most reasonable developers and artists that have talked about this basically lead with that of we already have seen over and over again through like canceled projects. Like you spend months or a year or years throwing your effort into a black hole in the end. That sucks.
Yeah, so it's like people in your position would like enthusiastically find the solution for this because they want a legacy. They want to actually have a history that still exists.
I think anybody that is talking about how difficult it is and how impossible it is that's kind of strange to me, because that's not, I think, a particularly common point of view within developers in the industry. It is more of an acknowledgement that a lot of times, if you want to go out of your way to help players, it can be difficult. But I think that very few people are saying that just because it's difficult, it shouldn't be done. And artists, I think, universally across the board are like, oh my God, please let people continue to use the things that I made. I would say that, I mean, I don't really know a whole lot of publishers, so I don't know what their point of view is. But as an outsider into the publishing industry, I think that it can be beneficial for them to have a plan, at least. Like, whether that plan is good or not, or protects consumers or not, I don't really care. It's more just like it would probably be beneficial to decide what to do before you commit to like a huge project,
I think there's another aspect of this that is like kind of unsaid, but is pretty important. And it's just that it's also important to have, if not having an end of life plan for continued support or the ability for players to play, just fucking tell people up front if you're going to shut a game off, because that's the issue right now as well. And this affects gacha games, especially. This is one of the reasons why I brought it up, is very famously, you can play a gacha game for 6 months, dump $700 into it, become the biggest whale, and then just log in one day and it's, hi, sorry, we're hitting end of life in a month. The game will be shut down and you won't be able to play it again. And like that was never disclosed.
The company even vanishes entirely too, along with it.
Exactly. And it's like, there's no prior warning. Maybe if you knew that game was going, like that the plan to get it shut off was one day this game will close and you will never be able to play it again, they wouldn't have wailed. And I think that's why so many companies and so many, in particular,
admittedly,
bad actors in this space
of gacha players
are rallying against this and are trying to be like, oh no, like this is impossible, this is a bad thing. Because it does eat into profit margins at the end of the day. Because you can't just, it's going to affect consumer habits. And this is a easy win for gamers to protect their own interests, and that's why it's something that people should rally behind.
It's really wild to me that people misconstrue this and don't support it in the first place.
Oh, it's for the
like,
benefit of
this was
basically
a very easy
everyone,
thing.
but the most cynical, like, profit carving people,
Yeah,
which is almost
wild.
none of the people making or consuming games. Like, everyone involved in this equation benefits from this, and the people that don't are the ones that are already in the process of inventing new genres to then burn to the ground over and over again. Because like the gacha thing, like there are signs already where it's like that is such a self-destructive cycle that you burn your entire player base of that genre very quickly by showing them over and over again that they shouldn't be loyal to these things and shouldn't put money into them because the thing will just spit in their face because it's whoopsole monetization strategy. And it's like it's just actively bad for gaming, and it's bad for that genre, and that genre won't live long because of its own behavior essentially. But it's like this initiative, like the goal of it at least, which is all you can really talk about because the actual practical implementation is something that gets legislated by the actual legislature, is just good for everyone that cares about video games, period.
Yep. Yeah, and Toaster, you're right. I think that it's very reasonable for a publisher to just say up front, like, if that's the extent of it, of this will just, we reserve the right to like just say like, hey, we're going to shut this off and here's how we're going to do it. Be upfront about that, because some games do. Blizzard in all of their games do at least say in the EULAs, we reserve the right to shut this down for any reason or no reason at all. I think that's the literal text. And it's like,
I've heard that
last day. Buried. That's not super well communicated. It doesn't have to be, but that's also not even the norm. Right?
Yeah,
like,
but also to some extent, gamers need to smarten
know.
up and react to things like that. And they should react to that kind of clause being in a game the same way they do to the idea that it has NFTs or AI and so on. Like, they should be like, oh, this game's a poison capsule. And we should all be signal boosting that and review bombing it until they change that. Because, like, that's not good for anyone. No one actually, no one, not even the people making the game want that. So why the fuck? Bobby Kodak's choice or something? Great.
But it's...
I don't think he's even around. Isn't he the one that's gone now? I don't remember.
I think he's gone, yeah. You mentioned that gacha games are not going to stick around for too long as a business model. I don't know what I think about that personally, but I do think that gaming is headed in, like, we're changing again. The norm of, games changed 10 years ago, or they've been changing from the craze of the co-op games.
20 years ago, we were mad at horse armor, but not mad enough, and everyone who was mad about that lost, and monetization has only increased exponentially, which I don't think is going away. I just think the specific form of it's going away because they have to keep changing what the predatory monetization strategy is every few years because people start falling off of that. That's why Overwatch has changed its own monetization strategy like 4 times in the last 3 years.
I don't know if the industry is changing or if it's, to me, it feels more like it's collapsing. To me, it's fucking awful to live through right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say the change that I see is the forever games just taking over, and like the new Switch came out. How many Switch 2 games are there? Not upscaled versions. I think there's only Mario Kart.
I've only heard of Mario Kart.
No,
there's
a few.
There's a few. Okay.
Yeah. There are a few.
But it fits, even if there was only Mario Kart, it fits into the market well enough because it's a console also, and like the Switch 1 sold so much. It's a console for people who have the Switch 1. They have games, they can play them upscaled, and
yes, I have heard about the forever game problem though. Where I was staying with a game developer in Canada a few weeks ago, and he was talking about how like because of the it's like the WoW problem, but for every genre now, where there's like the 1 or 2 popular games, and when new things come out, they continuously fail because people just don't want to stop playing the one game forever that they play, And yeah, most people
but
I know,
nobody wants to.
like my job is to
Yeah.
cover games, so I play a new game every week, and I love doing that. And I prefer to play a new, compelling, interesting single player thing, or something that has some kind of artistic thing to say, over playing one game forever just for the sake of looping. But most people I know that play video games do have like 1 or 2 multiplayer games that they play for years. Like the people that I live with right now have been playing the same game the whole time I've lived here for 7 years. And that's it.
This is there. I actually had a conversation with someone recently where they were like, "Oh, hey Toaster, like, have you played Clair Obscur?" And I was like, "Yeah, I loved Clair Obscur. It was amazing." And they were like, "Yeah, like I don't play single player games, but this is like the first one that grabbed me in a really long time." And I just sat there and thought about that, and I was like, people just don't play single player games. Like they literally will just sit on Call of Duty Warzone or whatever for 12 years straight, to the point where like one big single player game that monopolizes their time is notable enough to them that they will talk about it like it's changed everything.
No, I've had culture shock conversations like this a lot. Where like when I was playing Alien Isolation, I complained to Marty that I thought it was too long for what it was doing, and he was like, and I was like, yeah, it's like 20 hours long, and he's like, that's long, because his literally just doesn't engage with that type of video games. He's like, he's over there just playing Factorio and Overwatch, and that conversation is incompatible with him. And he's like, what do you mean 20 hours is too long? How can that happen? I'm like, I don't. Oh boy, we need a few hours to lay the groundwork for this conversation.
Yeah.
I think Clair Obscur was maybe not on the same level as, well, we'll see, but maybe not on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3 was, but or Alan Wake 2 for that matter. But it's
so there's a whole confluence of why like live service games, like you were talking about here, are so dominant in the developer space. For one, because they were profitable, or they are so profitable, they're the only thing that people want to fund. And when interest rates were super low, it was just so much money was being thrown at all these games. But the development lifetime, or the production pipeline, it takes a long ass time to make a game. So we have all these things coming out right now that it's like they were developed 4 years ago, and the industry was a real different place back then, where like the market was super, super hot on like the publishing and like investing side of things. And that is no longer the case. So right now we're starting to see the aftershocks of all that stuff that was set up 4 or 5 years ago, because that's how long this stuff takes to actually have its impact. And that's why it's like, hey, we're releasing a bunch of live service games right now, and they're dead, and then we lay people off, is because they were doomed 4 years ago and we didn't even know it, you know? So that's why it feels to me more like it's collapsing rather than changing, because I don't think that anyone really expected that, and I don't think that anyone knew what to do as we started seeing how this was going to play out. Like 2 or 3 years ago, I think a lot of people were looking at where we are now and saying like, oh God, what do we do to avoid this situation? What do we do to avoid the fact that all these things are going to release? They're probably not going to succeed.
They didn't.
But nobody, not even for lack of effort.
The slow motion train wreck of every game taking 3 to 6 years to make now.
A lot of people were looking ahead and being like, what do we do to avoid what is very obviously going to explode? And nobody could figure out. And there's too much time that delayed, because it's like, how do you predict 3 years in the future? Except in this case where it's like, in 3 years, what we're doing right now probably isn't going to work super well.
Yeah.
And so
we're having ET2, the second
do.
bubble burst, and soon we'll be all exchanging furry visual novels on floppy disks as the only form of gaming.
Okay, well, stop describing utopia.
Please.
All right, we're here on Earth.
I get to flex. I have excellent taste because this is Dark Souls poster, Paradise Killer poster, Disco Elysium poster.
Yeah,
at Astra. There's no multiplayer on the wall behind me except some features of Dark Souls.
You're probably a little bit closer to like the publishing side and got to see a lot of the production things. I entered a little bit later than when those conversations started, but at least that's the sense I got pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. I think the big thing is just that with regards to publishers and distributors, this idea of like always chasing the big thing. I mean, the big thing that people don't realize is that even from the publisher angle, you have a release slate, right? But that window is always moving. And publishers will make an agreement with a studio or a developer 3 years ago. And then, yes, their game doesn't come out for 6 years. But in that interim, it's not like a publisher isn't also trying to aim for the next big thing. And from my angle, it's kind of interesting because I actually think that the epoch of video games that we're in right now has actually been very stagnant for a long time. It's lasted longer than any other epoch of video games.
Yeah.
And as a result, we're kind of shuffling like, okay, we need to get the next big thing, but the next big thing is just the same as the last big thing, but it's just a newer version of that. And like that target is slowly not giving as much return as it used to, but there is no new epoch on the horizon. We don't know what the future looks like exactly. Yep. Whereas back in the day, I mean, going back really far, like, yes, no one really knew what to expect going from the PS1 to the PS2, but we knew something new was happening. We knew that games would change and what was popular was going to be something that was cogently different. Now we don't have that idea. And in fact, we are just rehashing the same few things with very iterative improvements or changes to them. So it's become harder and harder and harder for publishers to guarantee a new big success because they look at what's available. Yes, it's very scary. They look at what's available. They keep investing in the same things. The same thing. You can't strike lightning in the same place twice. It just doesn't like, there's no forward momentum really in how things are developing. And as a result, there's a lot of uncertainty. And it feels from the publisher perspective like it's coming out of nowhere because this has worked for so long. But from the outside perspective, like, obviously, if Overwatch is good and people only want to play Overwatch, they're not going to jump on Concord. You know, like, we already have Concord. We don't need to play, you know, that sort of thing. And it's that's my problem with the entire approach of what every time a AAA developer is like, I want to just recreate the popular thing because it's popular and they got money. Yeah, I want that money.
Cozy games.
It's like, but they already have. We already have that game. You can't make that game. You can't just steal having made that game. They did it. It's out. We're playing it the whole time you're developing this game. It's like you need to actually bring something to the table. And so oftentimes there's such a lack of imagination there, like where it's just like, I'll just try to get the game that's already out.
There's a bit of a paradox here too, though. And it's just that people don't want to leave their comfort zone, but they're always looking for something new. People are comfortable playing their one life game for 12 years until all of a sudden they've shifted to something else. And like, you know, it's nothing that you can really track.
But functionally, like, there never was a Minecraft killer. There never was a WoW killer. We watched it happen for decades, and people don't really learn that you can't just be that thing killer because you'll just be derivative of the thing. Like, the only people that were able to kill Dark Souls and specifically eclipse it in its own space were the developers of Dark Souls who went on to make new things within the field. 1 million people tried to make a Dark Souls, and I know what those games even are named. No one else even knows those games are real. Like, it's just you and me, Toaster. It's our job to remember the Souls-likes because no one else does.
Yeah, because no one else. Who the fuck is out there playing?
Meanwhile,
Mortal Shell,
the Dark Souls people are like fucking Bloodborne, fucking Elden Ring, cataclysmic success. Fuck you.
Yeah.
It's like because they're forging forward instead of trying to chase their own tail.
the idea of a killer app, I feel, does not extend very well to video games. I feel like it extends to a lot of other places in software, though. So you get a lot of like software-brained people that are like,
the only killer app in the gaming sphere is a missing photosensitivity warning.
This is something that I actually I have a very controversial take about this because it is bad, but it also I think it makes historical sense, and it's that there is no such thing as a killer app in a world where exclusives aren't as valued. And I'm saying this as someone who fucking hates exclusives. Like, I want every game to release on PC, and I never want to touch a console. But I routinely only purchase consoles to play their exclusives. And we are living in an era right now where there's a very strong potential that one of the big console players is exiting the market with Microsoft. And like they're closing their studios after buying a bunch of them. We're not really getting Xbox exclusives. And
I literally don't have the weird vertical square Xbox and forget that it exists, which is weird because I cover games for a living, and I would never imagine not buying a main console.
Yeah.
As somebody who almost bought an Ouya.
Yeah,
they laid off people when
9,000 people this week.
9,000 people this week.
I think I literally did come closer to buying an Ouya and a play date than I ever did to buying what the Xbox that I still can't name consistently.
Series X.
It's useless. It's just heavy and useless and expensive.
But also they lay off
player.
They lay off 9,000 people and their stock goes up. Yeah. That's why they say growth.
Number go up.
Yeah. Well, you gotta make room for the AI developers, and I'm not even joking.
Vibe coders.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Maybe the AI will make Fallout 5.
It probably will.
It won't be that different from Fallout 4, honestly.
Actually, AI is having a sneaky impact among other impacts. Major impacts. It's having a sneaky impact on the gaming scene because Nvidia in particular, which is I think 90% of the graphics card market,
something like that.
They're not a graphics card company anymore. They're an AI company. They don't care about their gaming. It's not
they never did.
That they don't care about the clients. Is that they don't care about their gaming sector as nearly as much. And graphics card continue to be very expensive, and AMD's trotting along, and doing the PlayStation chip, and they're probably going to doing the PS6 chip. But it's I wonder if that is going to mean that horsepower is just going to stop going up moving forward and stop being relevant, especially if Xbox exits the.
I don't think so, just because horsepower is what powers AI, so it kind of just goes in tandem here, and especially with games.
But if people don't have that, it is true that it's what powers. I'm not saying the graphics card won't be good. I'm just saying they won't be accessible, or
people will have it though. Is the thing, like the Switch 2 runs on an NVIDIA chip. Like I don't think that AMD or NVIDIA are going to exit. It is, but so are technically the AMD chips that are running the Steam Deck and what will be running the PS6 and things like that. Like comparative to PC hardware.
There's also a sword hanging over this entire sector, which is geopolitics. The shoe could drop on that at any point, which is scary.
But I mean, that gets back to the whole point of this entire talk, which is this is an EU initiative, and where the EU goes, everyone kind of has to listen. That is sort of the other side of that sword, is that like we do have some recourse. We have the ability to influence where these things go, and that's why this movement is so important.
Because so much of gaming is kind of just one market now, to an extent, especially with how PC it is and how online it is.
Yeah,
how PC it is, how woke.
Woke gaming. We finally won, boys. I just think about how my mom trades Nvidia stock, and she doesn't even know what it is. That's where Nvidia is now.
That's
my
normal.
Mom
that's
cares
normal
about the stocks for it.
Or that's normal for stock though.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, gonna have to wrap it up A minute or two here. Sign the petition if you live in the EU.
Link in the description.
If you don't live in the EU and want to go to prison, sign the petition as well.
That's not I don't think that is how it is. Is it if you are a EU citizen with an ID? So you can live in the EU, but if you don't have an ID, you cannot sign the petition.
Okay, true. I forgot to say if you are. So
I don't know how it works. If you have
EU country,
or because we have like ID cards.
I don't know. It's the EU, so you might also be able to sign it if you live in like the Game of the Year edition version of like their market or whatever the fuck 9,000 other things they call the EU. You know what I'm talking about.
No, that's not the EU. Those are the other regions that they.
That's what I'm saying. I know what you're talking EU about. Silver Plan, shit like that.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. I'm looking at the list, and I believe it's just the countries, not the extended territories or whatever.
Okay.
Also, links in the description to Birdcatcher and Kernel RPG and Toaster. If you support Toaster on Patreon, maybe he can afford his medication and he can stop vibrating continuously.
I got laid off and I need money paid.
That is true. He is unemployed. He's vibrating the entire podcast out of hunger. Little raccoon hunger. Feed the raccoon.
I've been kind of doing this because I'm just thinking about the fact that I'm going to eat a bagel in about 5 minutes. So that's my plan for the rest of the day.
That's nice for you.
I also have cake, so I will join you in the sweets department.
I'm gonna make coffee because I woke up 5 minutes before this podcast started. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. See y'all next time.
This
Bye.
is a fun one. Glad for letting me geek out for a little while.
Yep. People have been asking for new Dialogue Choices podcast. This is kind of like that.
Of course they have.
I'll just call it that. Then it is. You can't argue with me. Bye.
Yes, I can.